Please welcome to the stage Ted Schilowitz and Vacante.
Good morning. I can't believe anybody showed up so early. I barely made it, much less you guys. It's amazing.
Ted even brought his coffee on stage with him. He's still
did.
working on waking up, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. I am Vacante, and
Ted Schilowitz, hello. Good morning.
good morning, everyone, and thanks again for joining us. So, to morning, yeah,
there you go.
See, we're already living
We're
in the
off to a
future.
rip-roaring start.
We're mixing up morning.
To morning. Everybody should cheer to morning. Yes.
To morning. Good morning, and thanks for joining us for the future of entertainment and immersive experiences. And Ted and I are going to take you on a little bit of an inspirational journey, hopefully an entertaining journey on the way. So, jumping in. I think we covered this already.
We
did.
did.
We do this?
That's us.
See, we're already living in the future. We're ahead.
We both have interesting titles in our jobs. It's kind of fun.
That's true. So yeah, jumping in, we thought, hey, well, we're actually, since we're talking about the future, we're going to take it back and go back to our past for a little bit, and really encourage the audience here to think about the things that inspired you when you were a kid. Like whether it's an entertaining experience, could be TV, it could be video games, it could be places and spaces, but really encourage everybody to kind of get in your DeLorean or phone box or a time travel machine of sorts and think about those things that really inspired, creativity, culture, and connection. And so with that, I'm going to have Ted.
That's some of my inspiration of my early childhood. And when you bring up the idea of the past, I often, when I'm talking to people at South by or any other place in the world, and they say, like, you have this crazy job and you're a futurist. What even is that job? And often I say, well, it's actually much easier and much simpler than you might imagine, because anybody that actually is sort of good at being a futurist is really a pastist. What you're just doing is studying things that have happened already and extrapolating them into where things are going. So when people think you're making all these like predictions and you have all this insight into the world, all you're really doing is being a study of generational change and how things happen and why things happen, and then you can sort of look backwards and you'd be amazed at how shockingly predictive correct you can be when you start extrapolating forward. So that's sort of a good point as to where you've got all these slides of my childhood up there.
Well, and it's interesting, Ted, because there was a talk you did a couple of years ago, and it really, I loved it because you were talking about how you grew up in Florida.
I did.
And like, what was the moment? What's the significance of sort of Disney?
Why I would show these in a presentation. So this actually happened in a room like this at a space conference, believe it or not, where I was talking at. And I grew up in Central Florida. My uncle worked for NASA. My dad's a doctor. When he started his career in Florida, he was the youngest private practice OBGYN in the state. When he retired, he was the oldest private practice OBGYN in the whole state, which is an interesting story. So we moved from Brooklyn. I'm this little Jewish kid and get migrated down to Florida. And we moved to Florida, Central Florida, and in the early 70s, Florida was a fairly kind of racist, backwards place, and still parts of it actually are, so a lot of it hasn't changed. But a lot of it has changed quite dramatically, and the place I grew up in was called Orlando, Florida, but the first year and a half was pre-Disney, so my initial lens was this is kind of a scary place for a little kid from someplace else, and then 1971, I guess it was, this sort of fantastical new place opened that had the ethics and the DNA of openness and creativity and willingness to explore and willingness to change, and it just sort of happened to open up in my backyard. So as a little kid, I got exposed to one version of something, and then almost instantly another version of something. And new energy was coming in, and new people were coming in. I was really little. And I noticed that it was just very formative to me. So before a talk like this once years ago, I just was out on stage early, and they couldn't get the AV right, so it was like a whole big drama. So I was just, well, let's just do some questions while we started, and someone asked that question of like, like, how did you kind of get to this place you are? And I sort of said, I think it's because I grew up in this crazy place that I lovingly now refer to as the funnel of crazy, which is Florida. I mean, Texas is kind of, a sort of glob of crazy, right? But Florida is this little vestige that hangs at the bottom of the United States. And if things get crazy enough, they have to end up in Florida. This is part of the law of the United States, right? So I grew up in this crazy place where crazy things happened, and I just sort of managed to meld that into my sort of everyday existence, and then did TV production in Florida for years and years, and children's TV, and then ended up sort of building all these interesting products that people considered innovative and thoughtful, and that was sort of, like the beginnings of my life, and I guess turned out to be my career, which is odd.
Well, exactly, and that's why we wanted to get in that time machine.
Yeah, well, there's the future, all that, right? I mean,
the future and the past, right?
I was thrust into the future really early because I sort of lived inside the world of Epcot. Does anybody even know what Epcot stands for? Anybody? Anyone? Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. That was what Walt's vision was, and it was not designed to be a theme park. Before he passed away, his goal was to actually make it a living community where people would live in the future. That was his goal. And then, of course, commercial forces came in, and they did their best. But, things like the Carousel of Progress and the People Mover and all these things are things that have kind of happened now in reality, but started there. So it's kind of interesting, I guess.
I love that, and similarly, I put here's my time machine, going back to sort of the 80s, and I was very much inspired by, these are different points that entertainment impacted me. So everything from obviously the Back to the Future films. You see you see Space Mountain in there. So Ted, we've got some.
I had every one of these things.
We definitely
including
have
the
overlap.
Power Glove. I had the Power Glove. Yeah.
I actually didn't get the Power Glove. It was on the Christmas list, and never got it.
Never got it?
One day, Ted.
And we all had Light Bright, right? Did anybody here have a Light Bright? Yeah. Something about the creativity of just playing around with light, right?
Lights,
fantastic.
Colors, pegs, you could make whatever. And then the other one here is video art. And I don't, that's definitely a cultish console for any of you who have heard of it, but it was actually a console version of Paint. So.
Well, and it's funny, in the lower, I guess, left corner to me, you have Mark Summers, who I worked with a lot in Orlando. I worked on all those Double Dare shows when I was a much younger version of myself. So.
Well, I have to tell you, that was a dream. I would watch the show, and I'm like, gosh, I want to be on the show. I want to be on the show.
I meet so many people, and some friends of mine that sort of lived in that era working in Orlando at all these different shows that are, so I'm in my late 50s. I meet people that are in their 30s, 40s now, and they could care less about all the other stuff I did. But when I say, oh yeah, I worked on Double Dare and What Would You Do and Welcome Freshmen, and they're like, what? That's their lens of that was what they grew up on. And they're like, well, worked on that stuff? Yeah.
And even yesterday when you and I were hanging out, there was that nice woman we met, and that's exactly what she said. She's like, oh my gosh, Mark Summers, my childhood.
Yeah. So that was fun. Does anybody remember the TV game show Remote Control on MTV? Anybody remember that? Just a few of you. Wow, I guess we are getting old. You can look it up. It was kind of a very iconic game show that I worked on in MTV. It was back in the day. It was great.
Well, it was cool because it was like MTV had a game show.
MTV had a game show, a TV trivia game show. It's fantastic.
But similar to you, Ted, it's like I grew up in a place called Humble, Texas, so just outside of Houston. So it's a small town. So we didn't have a lot of access to, I didn't have Disney in my backyard, but what I did have was access to local arcades. You can see I don't know if you guys even know what Vectrex is. It was an early sort of carry-along console. It was my dad's, and I would sneak into his dad's den and play it. And then he was like, "Oh, you want to play this? Great." And it was pure delight playing that game. You can see it's not very sophisticated, but the big moment for me is when I got my NES. So Christmas came, I got my first NES, and I basically lived in NES land in my room, as probably a lot of kids did. But really, that connection of video games, techie toys, and light bright, not sophisticated, but definitely creative.
Right. So to your point about, looking backward to look forward, when you understood the fervor and the dynamic excitement you had about your NES and the games you would play, it's not really all that hard to extrapolate the success of Roblox, right? It's kind of all the same stuff, just through a different lens and a different form of technology and technology advancement. But humans sort of like to do the same things generation to generation. We just change the shell, we change the form factor.
Exactly, and I think that's a great point about Roblox. So when I was a kid, we didn't have social gaming. The social gaming was you came over to your friend's house,
come in the living room and hang out. Yeah.
And you had if you had a two-player game, two of you could play, and the other one would be in the background, sort of looking at the books, like how do I get to the next level, or combing through sort of the Nintendo Power magazine to find out. And that was social gaming, and I think that's what's really cool now about the likes of Roblox, about the likes of Fortnite, that it is that social connection. You don't have to leave your house. That's where kids go to meet up, hang out, explore, build, create, and be entertained, right? And so our next section here is all about pioneering the future. So we went to the past. Now we're going to get back in our time machine of choice and get to right now and talk about what it's like pioneering the future. So as Ted mentioned, we both have similar roles in terms of being explorers, being inspired in the world, bringing sort of what's new and next into our organizations and helping create new products or services. And we're going to kind of go a little behind the curtain now and share some stories. And before we jump into the stories, I like to show this slide whenever talking about pioneering the future or innovation. A lot of people often ask, like, hey, what does it take to innovate? Other than just a great idea, because ideas will only get you so far, as we know. But I think these principles are really important, whether you're a startup, you're a creator, you're working in a big company, and your role is, pioneering or innovating in the company. But we think about things alignment, right? So if you have like a co-creator you're working with, a team you're working with, just simply making sure everybody's on the same page, right?
Well, and from my perspective, I think, and this may be painfully obvious to a lot of you if you're doing anything entrepreneurial in your life or in your pursuits, but I think the two things that are the sort of driving principles are you got to have guts, you got to have balls of steel, and you have to not be afraid to fail. Like literally kind of in your core, even though outwardly your shell is, gosh, I really don't want to fail. Something inside you has to sort of say it's okay to fail, and not a lot of people really have that in their inner core. They might tell you they do, but the ones that really, really succeed at it, somehow, these days we talk about the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
And we were joking with some friends last night. Well, if it's a spectrum, we're all on the spectrum because it's a spectrum, right? And those that have this kind of part of the spectrum, which whatever their brain chemistry allows them to do and be, and their risk tolerance somehow is just more tuned up or stronger or harder than others. And even with that, most people never get to the other side, right? Most people never get to the success quotient of entrepreneurial, statistically. But the willingness to try, I think, has a lot to do with brain chemistry. At least when the people I surround myself with and the people that I admire from a risk-taking standpoint, they're certainly not perfect people. They have lots of foibles, right? But they manage to accomplish things. And that is kind of an interesting, at least for me, an interesting perspective on what we're talking about and where things go and why certain people create and certain people are wanting to create but are afraid to create.
I think it's a great point, and I think it's like you said, guts, gumption, and you're right. There are a lot of people who say, "Oh, well, it's okay to fail," but like you have to be able to take that.
Yeah, but that's just a phrase, right? It's like the words are the words, but if you really believe it, then you can accomplish something. Like people accomplish things, and still to this day accomplish remarkable things. I mean, look at the James Webb Telescope. Like, that's a massive potential failure if that doesn't work, right? And it failed a lot in various forms of its build. But then when you see the outcome of the things that we're able to create visually, that as a kid, that's complete science fiction. Like the fidelity of what we're seeing so far away, you know, from a light year perspective. I don't know. Are you guys in awe of it as much as I am? Because I'm just completely in awe of it, right? Anyway, okay. Got a little clap for the James Webb Telescope, which is good.
Now it's picking up.
There you go.
Cool. And then some of these other principles here, when we think about it, you know, I think now more than ever, diverse perspectives. And I'm really excited that companies are starting to be more open. You know, I think like back in the day, it was like you had to go to this particular university or you had to have this particular trade. And now, because we can connect with anyone, anywhere in the world, and people can, they're creators, they learn a skill, they're really awesome at what they do, and they may not have the piece of paper behind it, but they've got a portfolio and they've got skills, and I think it's important just for everyone.
Well, and the one you have in the middle there, at the lower middle, is it still up there? Oh, yes. Is resilience, right? So on top of everything else, like you're going to get knocked down a lot when you try and do something new. And if you're not resilient, you're not going to make it, right? So that's an interesting piece of the puzzle too.
It is not easy. And actually, when you and I had our chat last week, we were talking, and we were sharing our sort of wins and our failures as well. And one of the I appreciated about the conversation is so I have a closet. I live in a small house. I have a closet that is stacked with loads of products that went to market, failed.
Wall of failure. I have a good wall of failure too. Yeah.
And in there, and my husband keeps pushing me like, okay, can we get rid of this stuff? I'm like, no, it's like my learning library. It's references every one. It's resilience, it's learning. So tell them a little about your library of learning or whatever you call it.
I think, you know, as you were talking, I think maybe the important takeaway for me is also like how strong is your why? Why are you doing what you're doing? And I think in today's world, especially with the levels of technological accessibility that we have, people forget the why stage and they sort of move into the profiteering stage a little too fast. So I think if I talk to people that are building new products and new things into my job, one of the ways I describe my sort of role in the world of work is I'm a professional frog kisser, because you got to kiss a lot of frogs to find your prince or your princess. And a lot of what I do is I ask, why are you building this? Why are you moving down this road? And a lot of people don't have a strong enough answer to get me excited about why they're doing it. And I think a lot of things that relate to this broad term now that maybe a lot of you are pursuing in some fashion that we call the metaverse. I've just shrunken it down to the MV. I refuse to call it the metaverse anymore because it's already fully jumped the shark. So I was like, we'll just shrink it down to MV. So in the world of the MV, I talk to a lot of people that have all these ideas and pursuits that they're doing. And when I really start to ask them, why are you doing this? What's the reason you want to do this? They often don't have a good enough answer. And that frustrates me. I don't know if that frustrates you about new things too sometimes, at least in this lens. And maybe it's just my age showing up a little bit, but I want the why to be stronger.
No, I don't think it's your age at all. I think the why is really important. It's what problem is it solving? That's usually whenever we're coming up with something, I'm like, that's the question I ask is, what problem are we solving? Like, how is this making any of the ERs better, faster?
Yeah.
You know? Cool. And then just
I don't know if you guys all realize it would be so philosophical this morning when you came here, but hopefully this is kind of what you want to talk about. And
then of course, like a couple of other points that we have here, right? creativity, curiosity, and culture. So we touched on that a little bit. And also entrepreneurship. So that's a lot of what you and I do, right? It's so being that internal entrepreneur and asking the why and trying to find out what's next. So now, Ted's going to take us. Ted's going to take us on a journey here.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, in my short time on the planet, like the first, so I migrated out of the mostly children's production world into building tools for creative people, and I got this great opportunity to work with this small little engineering firm out of Northern California that you would have probably never heard of, that worked with a larger firm that some of you have heard of called Apple. And I spent 7 years helping them kind of cultivate this thing called desktop video, which at the time I was doing it was fairly primitive, but very innovative. Mm-hmm. And it's just continued to evolve and become more and more successful as a use case, because everybody's media device you carry in your pocket now does video on a chipset. Right? In the early days when I was doing it, you couldn't put it on a chipset. You had to build it externally and plug it in with all kinds of special wires.
It did not fit in your pocket.
Yeah, and then myself, I kind of got involved in the startup world, and I helped start a company. If any of you are in the media business or do editing or stuff on your computers in the media world, I started this little company with a partner of mine called G-Tech, which we sold a few years later. It's still the most popular brand of drives for multimedia purposes on the planet. So every time I go into an edit suite and I see them there, I'm like, yeah, I made those. People are like, what do you mean you made those? I'm like, yeah, I made those. What? Yeah. And then a number of years later, I got involved in the camera imaging world with a brilliant guy who founded a company, and he was from the sunglasses and apparel world of all things, and I came from sort of the desktop video world, and the two of us went on this journey to create a new form of motion picture capture that would be logical and respectful to the art and science of film and not the burgeoning art and science of video. It was designed to be a digital motion picture camera, not a digital video camera. And it started a revolution in the professional imaging world, of which there are now 6 or 7 competitors, but Red is really sort of the originator of that form and style of cinematography tool. And I was the first employee of that company, so it was quite a roller coaster, as you might imagine, of building something. And I mean, I could tell you stories forever about that, but some of the really interesting stuff is when the demand for something from a professional use, and this is not a consumer tool, at least it wasn't at the time, the professional demand was so strong. Once we launched this thing, we launched it in 2006, so I guess it's not all that long ago in the past, was so unbelievably powerful that we were almost forced to release this product before it was ready. And it did start a little bit of a weird trend, which sometimes I'm proud of and sometimes I'm embarrassed of products sort of entering the marketplace before they have the chance to mature and sort of clean up all the rough edges. And it really wasn't our desire to release it so hyper early. It was that once we took orders for this thing, people were like, we want it, we want it, we want it now, we're ready, we need it, we want it. And we were very overt in the first year or two of this product's life, saying, it's very early, it is not particularly stable yet. It does amazing things. Like when you saw the quality of the visuals on these gigantic screens, that's why people wanted it. But we forewarned them, we said, this is not really, this hasn't been around the planet for 30 years yet. So please tread with care. And they all promised. They all said, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And I said, please, at the very beginning, don't use it on professional products where the stakes are high and you can't do reshoots, and they all agreed. And then of course, instantly when we released it, none of them followed the rules. And then some of them would get mad. Some of them would be very respectful and say, look, we knew, we got what we signed up for, we get it, but the images are amazing, we're gonna put up with all the challenges. Then there were other people that were like, it's not working. I'm like, well, I warned you, I told you it was not going to do this. Maybe the best story is some of the early adopters of this camera. It was kind of interesting kind of group of heavy hitters that were very, very interested in the new and wanted to move off celluloid into digital, but didn't want to shoot on little teeny sensor cameras that looked like video. They wanted it to still look like film, or at least have the aesthetic of film. So one of them was Peter Jackson, and one was David Fincher, and one was Steven Soderbergh, and there were a few others. But Steven Soderbergh did one of the very, very first feature films with these red cameras. And I very distinctly remember spending a lot of time with him and kind of walking through, what it's going to be like shooting with these things. And it'll function, and, the way you use it will be just like a film camera, but there may be concerns and stuff. And now he's like, oh, yeah, we're going to go in Puerto Rico, deep in the jungle with them. And I'm like, well, you might want to have some film cameras on the truck just in case. Because, these things are still fairly prototype, right? He's taking them out. He's like, no, we're not doing that. I was like, what do you mean? He says, the minute I put a film camera on the truck, when this thing goes down, what's going to happen is my producers are going to start to make me shoot on the film camera. And I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to remove that from the equation, meaning you have to figure out how to make this work. And I understand that sometimes it's not going to work. But I want an engineer with me on site in the jungle to fix stuff, kind of MacGyver style, and that's what we did. And lo and behold, it worked. And he was able to get the feature out and do it completely digital end-to-end, and that started an interesting trend. So, in addition to the entrepreneurs needing to absorb and take some risk, the end users also have to absorb and take some risk. But if you're in the right headspace and mind space to say, I want this to work, I'm going to force it into the existence of working. And I will put up with whatever risk dynamics come along the way. I'm good with it. And I still, kind of hold a very sweet spot in my heart for that, because without that step, maybe we wouldn't have gotten as far as we've gotten. And maybe all the competitors that came later and sort of saw what we were doing and built other things that were likely more stable just because they came later, probably wouldn't have had that chance if we didn't push that envelope. And maybe we would be in a different place in terms of high-res imaging today. So, there's a certain degree of sort of group pride of that group. I was just a little part of it, but, that pride is strong.
I love that story. And like you said, it's even just like getting the people to test it out, right? And even at that time when the product came out, right, it's not like we are now, right? Most people, if they download an app and they see updates, maybe they don't like the changes, but it's something new. I think as just sort of consumers, we're used to that. But at the time, when you were creating the Red Cam, right, the notion of beta testing or, it may or may not work, that wasn't commonplace.
Well, certainly for a product of that caliber,
exactly.
Like what it's going to do, it's going to, shoot really big movies, big TV shows, big music videos, big things. It was interesting. It's like kind of creative pressure forced it into existence maybe a little faster than it should have. And we all kind of learned how to do this. And I think other product categories have gotten, and I think the consumer base has gotten more attuned to that. It's like, I'm signing up for this ride if I want to be an early adopter. I mean, I do a lot in virtual reality. Yeah, these days, I explore a lot in virtual reality and mixed reality, and I live this every day in my life. Like, there are people demoing things to me that are not in the public eye in any way, shape, or form yet, and they're always breaking. And, I'm the easiest person to demo in the world, because like they're all nervous. They're like, oh, it worked yesterday. I'm like, this is totally fine. It's fully expected. I'm with you. I believe in you, and we're going to stick with it. Don't, just calm down. It's all going to be okay. You don't have to panic that it's not working. Call your engineers. We're going to figure it out.
Just breathe and blame it on the demo devil.
Be fine, right?
But yeah, same thing. I worked in toys and games for a number of years, tech toys and games, and so oftentimes I receive those early prototypes. And my son kind of has grown up testing these toys, and some of them were like, I don't know about this, but
right. So it's an interesting life, right?
Yeah, having that feedback, and I love the story that you just said a moment ago too, because the idea of taking the film camera, the proper camera, like taking that tool away and just having to focus on using the Red Cam and working it out no matter what. I think like that is a huge plus, and to have like a kind of partner and collaborator to work like that.
Do any of you shoot high resolution imagery today, both still or video, and you're on that ride still to this day? And it's an interesting ride, right? We've learned a lot about this in the last 20 years, and there's way more to come. We're deep in 16 to 20K resolution experiments now. So, today's modern sort of very pedestrian cameras can shoot 8K with a very low price point, right? But that's not the end of the journey by any stretch of the imagination. There are things we're experimenting with in extraordinary exotic imaging that are pushing that envelope way further. And gigantic displays and gigantic display environments that I'm involved in that are, even for me, are just mind-blowing what is happening in the world of imaging and imaging display right now.
And actually, can you share with us a little bit, like, because to your point, like displays, all like we're like side of buildings or at events or even in your home, like how are you finding how?
Sure. Well, you know, like in our home, we all probably have ultra high res displays now, right? I mean, 4K displays are very commonplace. You buy them at Costco and Walmart. It's not, you know, but 10 years ago, those were super exotic. So that's some of that pastist futurist stuff is you kind of look at, like, oh yeah, I remember my first sort of flat screen display was a Pioneer, and it was $25,000 for a, 46-inch television that was 720p resolution. And it was mind-blowingly good then. And now, we can buy a $400 TV that is the size of a wall and it's 4K. But 8K used to be extraordinarily exotic, and now you can buy those as consumer devices. And a lot of this gets into this really interesting discussion about how far you sit from it and where it's going and the kind of resolution we use on screens like this. But if you want to get really out to the far edges of this stuff, and I did some consulting with this group at the beginning of their journey, there's this thing in Vegas called the MSG Sphere. I don't know if any of you have kept track of that. Well, the outside is wild, and not many people have seen the inside of it, but I'm one of the folks that's seen the inside of this thing, and it's even wilder. It is the largest physical high-res display in the world, at least today, and they're going to open it, this fall. So it's going to be crazy what you can do with this thing in the right hands. So, these are things we're keeping a close eye on. It's always a moving scale.
Cool.
What else are we going to talk about?
Bear with it.
Now and next. Okay.
Oop. Okay. Thanks, Ted. Well.
Everything is easy compared to AV at a conference. This is what I've always learned.
Hey, there we go.
There it is. Just getting a graphic up there is super hard.
Cool. But yeah, now and next. So we went to the past. We talked about like some of those pioneering challenges and sort of importance of grit and gumption and resilience. And now and next. So really jumping into interactive storytelling, XR, AI, and sensory. Sensory is like
this
a
is all
hot
the stuff
topic.
you and I are making our living at today, right? So.
Yes. And I loved in one of our conversations how you said, like, we're explorers. I mean,
Absolutely.
At the root, if we had to summarize it, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really all I've done for a long time now is explore things that are not mature yet, that are finding their way into the world. And I often say, you can't do everything, right? So if your tool and trade and your skill base is to be really comfortable with things that are sort of early in their curve, then once it sort of gets to a certain point, go ahead and leave that to others. Let them mature it. Mm-hmm. Your job is not to grow it up into a full grown-up. Your job is to get it from infancy through the toddler stage. That tends to be my job. So once it's mature enough, it sort of has less interest for me. I'm like, other people can handle it now. I'm on to the next thing. So that's kind of where I guess the now and next part comes in.
It's a great point. I will say over the years where I found I've had some challenges is I can always see the potential in things. I can always see the potential, but as we know, like there's timing, right? Like timing or cost or all those different indicators. And like you, I'll get really excited. I'm like, okay, cool. And here's where we can see those opportunities and map the opportunities. And then, come 3 years later, 5 years later, it's commonplace. I'm like, oh, are we talking about that again?
Yeah, I think the stuff I work on is so early on that I'm always saying to people, lower your expectations on the timing. Things take way longer to enter into the consumer realm and truly, grasp hold than you think. And really almost the bare minimum timing is 10 years from when a product or a product category starts to come into life and come into existence to really find its even beginnings of maturity. At least that's what I've discovered over doing this now for long enough that I kind of have like a track record on it, and I could go, yeah, about 10 years. Yeah, about 12 to 15 years. Yeah, it's like 2 to 3 years, no. And when people have the illusion that things are happening in 2 to 3 years, they actually forget all the underpinnings of the things that happened well before it to kind of get it to the stage where people instantly think it's happening. And that's kind of where we're living now with kind of this nomenclature of Web3 and MV and all this stuff is everybody kind of thinks it's like all happening so fast. I'm like, did you really forget about the last 40 years of what we used to call the World Wide Web and cyberspace and the information superhighway? Because all we're doing is just evolving that tool set and turning it into things that will allow us to use the pipes that have grown throughout the world, and still much of the world doesn't have these pipes, so it's a bit of a pipe dream for a lot of the planet Earth. But in dense places like Austin, Texas, or California, where I live, or parts of Florida, or dense communities in the United States, it's not a pipe dream anymore to get super fast broadband, and we can do all these things over a compute system that used to only be able to display on a 2D plane of existence. Now we can display extraordinarily wide, high-resolution graphics and things that start to feel real to us, right? Start to create simulation dynamics to us over those pipes. So.
Well, and using your nomenclature of MV.
Yes. Good, it's taking on, which is good.
Well, everybody will have MV T-shirts by the end of the festival, Ted. But in the spirit of that and what you just said about, the internet, World Wide Web, I mean, it's the same thing when we think about MV, right? Like, how long have social and collaborative games been going on? I mean, it's
and even just,
decades now.
For those of you that may look a little like me, maybe you remember this thing that used to be called America Online, and then they shrunk that to AOL. So I'm on the right track, maybe. And they had these things called AOL chat rooms, and those were a thing. Now they were sort of primitive graphically to what we would do today, but it's the same human behavior that we see, again, popping up over and over and over again. So anytime people think something is wholly new, it's pretty easy to point out that none of these things are really new.
We can connect
They're just
the dots
evolutions.
to...
Right. Even all the stuff that I guess we'll talk about next, which is like next-gen devices and all this stuff. None of it's new.
Yeah, we'll just kind of some
There's a lot of interesting images on it.
Inspiration here. Yeah, and so,
No, and now numbers. That's the boring
I
part. We get to the boring part of the presentation.
I know. We'll get to those in a minute. But yeah, just for some inspiration here, one of the things I thought was interesting when you were talking about World Wide Web there and MV, but also AR. Like AR, think about even like 5-7 years ago where AR was, and now everybody has it on their device.
Yeah, and I still think that's a fairly restrictive form factor for augmented and mixed reality, right? I think it's a step in the right direction, and when you hear a guy like a Tim Cook who runs Apple say things like, augmented reality and mixed reality will be that thing that at some point in the future, you will kind of not even understand how you lived without it. Just like today's world of a smartphone, and I've given many talks about this dynamic of like, a smartphone is no longer technology. A smartphone is part of your biology. It is so linked to what you do and how often you hold it, touch it, connect with it, use it. It's happening right now. There's people multitasking on their biological devices, and that is not technology anymore. It is actually embedded in your physical and mental DNA, right? Whether you want to admit it or not, it's 100% happened to you. But we're still using a form factor from generations ago of it should feel like a little box. Like I used to show this image of, remember, did anybody live long enough in Apple sort of nomenclature to remember the Mac SE, the little cute little box with the screen? If you take your iPhone today and hold it up against a Mac SE and look at the screen, just the screen size and how it works, it's remarkably close. Like 40 years later, we hold our Mac SE, basically. But a thing I guess maybe we're this professing, but involved in for quite a number of years now, is the belief structure that those devices are sort of magic windows to the world, and the next devices that we will get over time, and again, you need to lower your expectations, and if you look at companies like what we lovingly refer to as the artist formerly known as Facebook, they're putting a bunch of money into these things that still look like boxes on your face, and they're evolving it and putting huge amounts of capital and resources in it to see if they can get to this kind of rainbow at the end of the gold at the end of the rainbow, so to speak. But for me, the perception of technology has gotten to a point where we're starting to learn and remember where our eyes are and where our ears are, and they're not in our hands, right? So if we get to a point where it makes more sense to wear it than hold it, a lot of you that think, oh no, well this is the device I'm going to use, like this is the device I'm going to use forever, will not be using that device anymore. And all we can do is use our pastest reference and remember the day that a lot of us used to work on computers that were these giant CRT screen things that you had to put on a desk, and and then we kind of evolved that, and and now we have very low-cost, high-mobility laptops and tablets and these things called phones, which we really shouldn't even call phones anymore. They're just pocket computers, right? But the next evolution is really hard. So this goes back to that guts and gumption thing. Extraordinarily hard to do what we're trying to do, to get it right, to get the fit and finish right, to really make it something you're going to want aspirationally instead of the device you have today, is a really hard challenge. And the human dynamics of understanding how we're going to evolve that biological tool set of what we now call a smartphone into some kind of wearable thing, whether it's glasses or implants or whatever we all end up using, but it's going to be closer to our eyes, and that digital landscape that we all sort of hold in our hands and is this big, and we kind of hold it up and look around when we want to do the AR version. That's the little kind of magic window version. That magic window will explode. So in the fairly near future, I could be wearing glasses that just look like glasses. Today, we test things that almost look like glasses. And if I wanted to turn every single one of you into a giant dragon, I could. And it wouldn't be just in my phone like this. It would look real to me, right? And this goes all the way back. So it's like a comedian doing the callback, right? This goes all the way back to that first part of our discussion when you talked about Disney, because a big part of my DNA was growing up within the idea of simulation experiences in theme parks early on. It was a big part of my formative years and my formative understanding of what entertainment can be and will be, well beyond a traditional screen, well beyond a screen that looks like this, that we know where it starts and we know where it ends, right? In theme parks, if it's done correctly, you don't know where it starts or where it ends. It's just this joyous, amazing experience, and it's everywhere around you. And now we're able to do that with technology, and we sort of bring that home, which is the beginnings of home VR, which is working and starting to be profitable and starting to be a viable part of our industry, both professionally and personally. For industry and home fun use, like your NES, the NES of the future. But it's just like we're just getting started with this sort of use case and where it's all headed. So I would say you should be very optimistic about where it's going. A lot of companies are putting a lot of money and a lot of resources against moving from the smartphone age to what comes after the smartphone.
Well, and I think it's interesting too. I think there's, if you read about it, there always seems to be this, I call it anxiety, about what's the holy grail, like the thing. And there's no the thing in terms of a single device, right? Because we, as people, move, interact differently in the world. Like VR, nobody needs to be living in VR. I love VR, I love VR gaming, I love exploring, like when you're talking about 3D design of a physical product and getting people collaborating around that, cool. When you think about AR and you want to have some gameplay experiences or turn people into dragons, right? You can do that. And I do think there is, it's going to be interesting to see where glasses go. We saw there was the Ray-Ban ones were away. Snap many years ago were doing some experimenting.
Just in the last 10 years, again, using that 10-year lens, we've seen things that were sort of on the edge of impossible to starting to enter into the age of possible now. The optics are starting to get good, the science is starting to get good, the physics of it are starting to get good, and the really big players, the one I've mentioned a few times today, haven't really even entered the market yet, right? They're watching and learning and keeping a very close eye on the mistakes that have been made so far in the process of learning and seeing if they can learn from those mistakes. So I think you're going to see the next 3 to 5 years is going to be a very interesting time for all of us as we evolve as our technological human selves. It's going to be a pretty interesting time.
I think so too. And one of the products I worked on that brought me so much joy was a company called Merge. They're based here in Texas. And actually, this was probably about 7 years ago or so, and they had created the Merge goggles, and they could also be not for VR, but also AR. And mobile, so you just slide in your mobile phone, and it was accessible there. And so I really enjoyed working with them and their philosophy in terms of accessibility. Now, all consumers weren't ready for that yet. And I think that's really key. Like you were saying, in the next couple of years, we're going to see that. And so there's a lot of great experimentation with multiple companies in terms of glasses and sound, the sound being embedded in there. I haven't quite got to that mass scale or affordability, but I think it's going to be coming soon. And then some of the other things that we're hearing a lot about are wearables. It seems like wearables keep coming in and out of fashion. So any takes on wearables?
Well, like I said, I think this is all part and parcel to the idea of, where the biology works. I mean, again, if you look at the different companies, I guess we'll call it Apple again because they've had remarkable success with the ear part of it, right? If you look at how many attempts at the various kind of forms of earbuds and various Bluetooth headsets and all these crazy form factors over the years. And ears is much easier than eyes, right? It's a simpler sort of use case. But it still took a really long time to get the ergonomics where they were kind of fashion correct, fashion forward, felt like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like we often joke about you'll sometimes see people that wear kind of these weird Bluetooth headsets that have the weird microphone that kind of hang down to here from about 20 years ago. And like I used to joke, because I work for the company that makes Star Trek, right? It's like the last person that looked cool wearing something like that was Lieutenant Uhura, right? And after that, it was like, why are you wearing that stupid thing in your ear? But these days, with the design ethics of the AirPods, it's like that's completely acceptable. To the point where there's some stuff we're doing with our CBS Sports folks, where on the PGA Tour, I don't know if any of you are golfers or like to watch golf on TV, we did this kind of inside the ropes stuff with CBS now. And the golfer, while they're playing the sport, which is one of the few sports you could actually do this with, right? They'll go on the hole while he's actually in competition and give him an AirPod, stick it in his ear, and he's now communicating with all the sportscasters, and he's talking about all the shots he's doing while he's doing it. And no one is like, oh God, why are they making that golfer wear that weird contraption? It's just like an AirPod. He puts it in and it totally works. So there's a cultural sort of societal thing that happens with technology when, for whatever reason, how many times and how many sort of cycles it takes to kind of get it right for the human equation. And Apple tends to be pretty good at that. Other companies tend to be good at it too, but Apple tends to sort of excel at it. The visual one is coming, right? Today we put these things on, and they're clunky and goofy, but the experiences are remarkable that we can do with them. But it's not like you're gonna just wear these things on the street. Even the most refined ones are not street wearable yet, right? The ones that have visual tool set in them, right? But trust me, it's coming. I'm seeing them. It's what the coolest part of my job is. I get to see things way, way before they actually have consumer viability. So I can tell you that it's coming. Get ready. Because in South by Southwest, somewhere in the future, we're all going to have something different than we have today to communicate with, to connect with, to socialize with, to have fun with. And the remarkable experiments that a lot of these young entrepreneurs and these gigantic companies are doing are leading us down that path. Some of you in this room may be doing it right now. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm seeing all kinds of interesting stuff on the chat, too. Anyway. Is this interesting to you guys? Are we getting to some interesting stuff? I have no idea. Okay, all right, well, that's good. Not many people left, so that's good.
Okay, so here's the boring slide.
Okay, here's the boring slide. All right.
But important, right?
Yeah, sure.
Important.
Oh, yeah. We all have to make a living somehow, right?
So, but we just kind of wanted to pull a couple of numbers for the group here, touching on a couple of different areas of technology that we've already spoken about, right? So, we're seeing that 5 trillion, I'm making up words to see future.
I got it. I
making
knew what
words.
You were saying.
But 5 trillion in MV growth, right? We'll need to edit this to say
Does anybody
MV.
buy that? Does anybody believe that? I guess if I take it out of the lens of the MV and just call it the continuation of the internet, I would tend to believe that. I would say I know that, the internet in all of its forms is multi-trillion dollars per year as a worldwide revenue dynamic. So if we remove the nomenclature and set that aside and say the evolution of technology and how we use it is likely multi-trillion dollar opportunity. Yes, I would agree.
I like
would
that
remove
phrasing.
the nomenclature.
Yep. It'd be interesting to, as studies evolve, to test out some of that nomenclature and see, because this was obviously
See where it breaks up and where it breaks
Yes.
down, right? Yeah.
And then just another one here, when you're looking at location-based, we actually didn't touch on, talked about Disney, but like in terms of location-based entertainment, we're seeing a ton of growth there, right? We're looking at brand and licensing market, an area that you live closely in.
Yep.
A ton of growth there. And then haptics as well. We didn't really touch on haptics yet, but a lot going on with haptics there. And then of course, AR continuing to grow. And that's AR market overall, not necessarily like by device.
Right, so these are real numbers, right? Significant numbers. The LBE number is maybe the smallest of the pie because it's very sort of segmented, but it's really important because location-based entertainment tends to be the precursor to home entertainment. And again, using our pastis lens, the arcade is what became home video entertainment, which is a much, much bigger business than arcades. But if you didn't have the arcade step, you don't have the home video step. You don't have Grand Theft Auto, right? And if you don't have the Nintendo Wii, you don't have virtual reality. And people are like, what? This is a really interesting one, maybe for those of you that want to go back in time a little bit. Did anybody ever play the Nintendo Wii? So did you think you were playing a video game? You were actually doing a home simulation experiment for our friends at Nintendo. Because if you remember what the Nintendo Wii was, you weren't sitting on your couch doing this, like a video game. You were bowling in your living room. You were playing tennis in your living room. Grandma was bowling in the living room, and that was amazing. Yes. Because that was a simulation. It was something you could only do in a theme park up until our friends in Japan at Nintendo were like, you know what? We can make a different kind of game. We can use this controller to simulate a behavioral use case. And the reason why we knew, those of us that were deep in this, that it was a full-on simulation was in the early days of the Nintendo Wii. Who remembers this story? I'll start the story and you could probably finish it. You had your controllers, and you would get so into the thing, tennis, boxing, whatever it was, and there was no safety strap in the very first generation of the Nintendo Wii. Nor did they have the little rubber condom on it to protect the thing. It was hard plastic. And people would get so into it that they would whip their controller into their TV and break their TV. And it happened a lot, to the point where Nintendo was like, we better put some straps on these things. And even more important, we better put some rubber gaskets on them that we could sell as an accessory, because people are hurting themselves. Because not only was it going into their TV, it was going into their friend's face when they were swinging, right? I have this, I don't know if you have that visual, but you can find it online. I have this really interesting visual comparing the launch video of the Nintendo Wii to the launch video of the Quest, which is the first real consumer level VR device at scale from now Meta. It used to be Facebook, used to be Oculus. It's the same video. You're looking at the same stuff. It's just the display changed. It's now fully immersive. You wear it instead of sticking it on your wall. But the behavioral cues are exactly the same. And when we play VR games, all we're doing is playing modern Wii games. So the Nintendo does not get enough credit for starting that revolution. Everybody thinks it started with Facebook and Oculus. It did not. It started with Walt Disney and Nintendo. So that's my thesis on this.
Well, I love that, and I love the form factor too. Like you're talking, the straps. Anybody who has a Quest or
same.
have
the controllers and the straps, same kind of thing. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Let's see here. This is one definitely one to touch on in terms of products. So when we think about
this is some of your work that you're doing.
Yeah, so when we think about now and next as well, some of the stuff we're doing at Dentsu, and actually if you guys haven't been to the Creative Industry Expo, go check it out and have a play. A lot of the stuff Ted and I are talking about today, there's loads of great companies out there who are demoing stuff, and you can kind of whiz around and experiment with some of the early stuff and some of the stuff that's in market now. But a couple of the things we're doing over at Dentsu, one, we actually recently announced our Dentsu Next Space, and it is an MV experience. in collaboration with Microsoft, LinkedIn, and head office space. And it's all about kind of co-creating what's next. So getting mainly from like a B2B play, where you can go in. We have things like working with companies to create virtual test labs, helping companies save a ton of money on that and being more inclusive.
I'm curious from the Western world, do people know Dentsu out here? Dentsu is a huge corporation in Japan, Japan-based, but it's like, I work for a pretty big corporation, Paramount Global, but Dentsu is way bigger than what we are. And they have all these different sort of work veins and stuff. It's a really interesting company. And it's exciting to see that they're kind of leaning into this innovation curve and not afraid to sort of experiment with this stuff, because probably a lot of this, I would say that these things are not their revenue drivers right now. So it's great that they're taking these risks and seeing if it will become a revenue driver somewhere in the future. I think that's interesting.
No, I appreciate that, and that's exactly right. Like, our whole thing is all about creating what's next. And as we touched on earlier, it's like you have to have those swings. You have to experiment. I think one of the things for me, kind of personally, that's important to me is, you hear a lot of different companies out there talking about the space, but like, who's actually out there experimenting in the space,
right.
Having those at-bats, right? And taking it and having the failures, having the learnings, and bringing real products to market. And so that is what's exciting about being at a company like Dentsu. Actually, in the Creative Expo there, we have one of our items here called hug ticks. So instead of haptics. Hug ticks. instead of haptics. So it's all.
That's the sort of thing that's grasping you around you. Okay, got it.
Exactly, and so it's the idea of how people can feel good and better with hugs, and you can actually go check that out.
So you'll be able to do a remote hug with somebody in Japan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Anywhere. And then another one is transcend dance. Right, so like those sensory experiences. So there's actually, you can see there are different movements and dances based on sense, and really applying a bunch of different technologies there. And then the other one here, it's in Japanese at the far right there, and that's like a snack experimentation that we're doing. So you don't actually eat food, but it mimics the sound. We were talking about sound and behavior of food.
That's like a modern Tamagotchi type of a thing? You got to feed it to keep it alive, or what's the point of that?
No, this is like like you as a person can experience this. So you're listening to sound.
So it's a sensory experience.
Exactly. And so if you want like potato chips or candy, they have a salad option, to keep it.
You can hear what salad sounds like.
Exactly. So touching all the different sounds and sensory experiences. So yeah, just wanted to share a little bit about that, and then. That's us. And
that's us.
Have a couple of questions.
Yeah, well, I'll mention because, on my little micro version of my iPhone, which I know a lot of you have, and it's Siri just turned on. Isn't that funny? It's freaking out.
She's always with us.
My buddy Charlie, who might be in the audience or might be nearby talking at another thing, he just sent me a note because all the stuff that you're talking about. So if you want to go deeper than a 1-hour session on this, he and I do a podcast every Friday. With our third partner in crime is a guy named Roni Abovitz, who used to be the CEO, and he's the founder of Magic Leap. So the three of us get into all this stuff on a weekly basis. The show gets posted sometime Friday afternoon every week, and we talk about all kind of interesting stuff. This past week we had Blake, who runs the interactive XR stuff of all South by. So if you haven't had a chance to go up to I think it's at the Fairmont this year, not the Hilton. Go up and see that. There's a lot of emerging tech there. And if you want to listen to our show, it's called This Week in XR, which is something I do in addition to my day job at Paramount. So
yeah,
I'll call that out.
Definitely a good show. You guys know I always like the topics they have. I'm a listener. But we have just about a minute or so left. It looks like we had 2 questions here. We want to try and.
So yeah, other than and he's making a joke, which I'll skip. But other than higher resolution, what's the next innovation of camera sensors? So for me, this goes into a sort of a deeper thing. You'd probably do a whole other session on as people head to their next thing. The real next innovation, I believe, is volumetric capture. As we start to move away from traditional screens that have 2D pixel grids, like the screens you're looking at of us, me giant size there, and we start to have wearable glasses that have actually real volume in them as a tool set, we need a different form of capture. We cannot, and 3D is an illusion of that, but it's only on one plane. Volumetric capture, which I'm involved in a number of different companies, a startup I'm an investor in called Polygon and a few other things. There's a lot of companies doing this. Microsoft was doing this for a long time. It's very early stage, right? But it's an important next step in what cameras will do is capture volume as well as high fidelity so that we can use them in the devices of tomorrow. I think that's a...
And there's what I would say, they actually just won an innovation award, Move AI. They're one to definitely check out.
What's this one? When it comes to traditional entertainment, what would you say the why is? What problem does popular entertainment solve? Wow, that's a big one. I probably won't be able to answer all that today, but I think certainly the problem that popular entertainment solves, I don't know if it solves it, but it helps people find enjoyment in their lives. It's a lens to, like, you know, it's an aspirational lens, it's a creative lens, it's an excitement lens. In another session someday, we could talk about how the technology of everything on demand has changed the entertainment spectrum. That's a big deal. That's a big question.
But also like creativity, culture, kind of we were talking about inspiration.
Yeah, sure.
Collaboration, and also how entertainment touches all different technology and pieces and carrying those stories and being able to do that with, you know, friends, family, and having those shared experiences.
Right. Well, and as the last one, as people are trickling on to the next thing, how is Web3 different from MV? In the short answer is they're both just nomenclatures, right? To me, there is no Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, really. We just, as humans, have to give them definitions. So there is not like a hard stop of Web 2 where we live today into Web 3. It's just a transition over time to things getting more evolved. But Web 3 is the underpinnings, the important underpinnings of what the MV will live on top of. So it's actually the more important infrastructure. It's you know, the things that, like in the traditional web dynamics we call HTML or hyperlinks or hypertext. That's what the Web3, and then there's the whole economic component with crypto and blockchain, and which we didn't have time to get into today, but you know, on and on and on. That's, I don't know if we're, I feel like we're over time.
Yeah.
I see the red light is on, not the green light.
Yeah.
We probably have to stop.
Well, thank you all for joining us.
Thanks for staying. Appreciate it.
Please connect. Thank you. Have a great South by.